Real Prince Williams talk show. I got a special guest here today, Claude Allen Swain. He is a producer, a composer, Navy SEAL extraordinaire. I'm kidding. He's a veteran. Um, he's a friend who I consider a brother, and he's a husband, and he's an outstanding man. He's a smooth brother, smooth operator. You know, I call him Obama. No, I'm excited to have him in on the show today. We're going to talk about a little bit about him, and we're also going to talk about maybe a little bit about what he's going to talk about on the TEDx talk that we're having that I'm hosting here at the Performance Center in San Luis Obispo on April 14th. So, with that being said, Claude Allen Swain, welcome to the show.
Prince, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. And first and foremost, I am not very smooth. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, yes, I am a veteran. Not as a Navy SEAL, but I was in the United States Marine Corps, so Department Navy. So you're close enough. So
Okay,
that works.
All right.
About it. That works. We have more guns. But I do appreciate you having me on tonight. I believe what we're doing is very important. So thank you very much. I appreciate your hospitality.
Absolutely, man. Hey, so to start off the show, tell us a little bit more about yourself. We come to know each other because we're next door neighbors, and just by happenstance, we wound up running into each other, becoming really good friends. Now we're family. So tell us a little bit more about where you're coming from, what you've done, how you've gotten here, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So it is kind of interesting. We are next door neighbors. Isn't that funny?
I know.
How life throws these interesting situations within your grasp, honestly. And I guess that's kind of where I'll start. I grew up in a small farm in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. And I grew up in a family that was, we had family businesses, family organizations, with the church, and also farming and real estate and things like that. So from a certain point of view, I grew up in a, you remember those Norman Rockwell paintings?
Yeah.
Yeah, where you have like a church steeple and you got like the fences and like everyone's going to church and all that stuff. That's kind of, honestly, that's actually how much of my life was up until I was about a teenager. Curiously enough, as it is, especially with a multiracial family in the foothills of the Appalachians in Virginia. So I grew up around like a lot of gospel music, and politics was definitely something that was discussed. Everything from Ronald Reagan to Jimmy Carter, Martin Luther King. Not so much Malcolm X, because we were obstinately a Christian family.
Right.
But at the same time, those aspects of my life were defining towards me. My mother had the dubious privilege of being one of the first people to help integrate our local high school, of all things. And so she had to endure the busing when she was 18, a senior. So, and being a very, very strong woman, because my grandmother was a bishop, and so she built 4 churches. So I came from a family of very strong women.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty cool. I'd have memories of like NAACP meetings. I do have those memories to where we were fighting for equal rights all the way through. I also have a lot of vivid memories of giving discussions on W.E.B.D. Du Bois and and how these African, and I use that in air quotes, African populations were refugees, and what that looked like insofar as Reconstruction was concerned, specifically outside the war. And I mentioned this because of, when you asked me where I came from, much like many people in the South, a certain degree of institutionalization of like a Jim Crow system. And that's important to note, especially in today's world, I think. But that's a whole other discussion for a different podcast. But I think it's important to note that that when I was born, 1974, I was born at the back end of what was considered, I suppose, the modern civil rights era.
Right.
But I have come to understand, at least for me personally, that there is no era. It's just a continual fight.
Yeah.
And that's important. That goes across all spectrums of our society, not just Black or African American culture or anything like that. Like, that's another discussion too. Well, yeah. So you have a question?
Yeah. We're not that. There's no big difference between age between us, and I mean, you're a little bit older. I have to make sure that's known.
It's okay. I feel it every day.
I
feel it every day. I can't dunk anymore.
I grew up in the Midwest, or actually I didn't grow up in the Midwest. I'm a military brat, but I'm from the Midwest, the Chicago, Illinois area. And you grew up in the South. Very different dynamics, and I had a very different dynamic being a military brat and kind of living all over from a young age. So I really, haven't had that experience of having to deal with the separation in the population, or the separation in demographics, because everybody was integrated in my childhood. And you said you came on the heels, or the back heels, of that civil rights era, or that modern civil rights era.
Yes.
So in the South.
Yes.
And you're light skinned. So
that's a salient point, actually. You can
but I mean, there's a seriousness to that. I'm being funny, but there's a seriousness to that. How was it growing up during that time, having to deal with all of these different extraneous factors, so to speak?
Yeah, that's actually a rather salient point. Honestly, we chuckle about it. We chuckle about it in the sense of what that even looks like for someone like any modern athlete. I don't want to throw names out because I don't want people to make any particular judgments or anything like that, one way or the other. But within every level of our society and our cultures, and that's American cultures, skin color does have an influence, unfortunately.
Right.
Everybody knows this. But in regards to your question, it was interesting because I guess kind of in the same theme of the program, I developed a lot of determination, honestly. And I'm not using that as a plug. I promise you, I'm not using that as a plug.
No, look.
but as I consider it, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of a composer named Rimsky-Korsakov?
I've heard of it. Yes.
I think maybe in our discussions.
Yeah.
So Scheherazade. It is basically a, I can't recall if it's an opera or not, but it's been done in so many different ways. He's a Russian composer, nationalistic composer. That's what he was branded at the time. Contemporaries of guys like Stravinsky and, Tchaikovsky, and I think Tchaikovsky, but anyway, it's irrelevant as far as his love, where he stands within that timeline. What's most relevant about that is actually being in the middle. So when Scheherazade, which is it's a piece of music about Sinbad the Sailor. And the most fascinating thing, and what's changed my life actually in a lot of ways, was Rimsky-Korsakov and the Smurfs. So I wasn't really a fan of the Smurfs because I just thought, by that age, at 6 years old, I was starting to already think about G.I. Joes, and I grew up on a farm, so the idea of a little blue creature running around, it wasn't my jam. I didn't dig it, right? But there was one character named Gargamel who was the protagonist, and the theme music for him actually is the very same opening, for the most part, of Scheherazade. And so when I would, my brother and I, and actually,
Interesting fact
yeah, and
there.
actually, when you go back and you look at it, and now we're talking about music, many of the classic cartoons, whether it's Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny, especially the Barber of Seville,
Yeah.
they did a whole thing with that. Same thing of most Disney stuff, like Mickey Mouse, all that jazz, Fantasia, which I saw at early age too. Um, Leopold Stokowski, he was the conductor for that, and he was chosen specifically to do that film because of his the weight of his presence. Um, but all that to say, how that ended up being a determination for me, I found that I loved that piece because my brother and I, we would take 45s, and it would be Motown and gospel music and Sesame Street records.
So for the younger audience,
Oh yeah,
a 45
it's a vinyl. Yes,
is a vinyl. And if you don't know what a vinyl is, it's a record.
yes,
And you put it on a record player.
yeah. A side and B side usually had a couple songs. It's like an EP, basically.
Right.
Yeah, it's like an EP. So my parents had like hundreds of these things, or at least it felt like hundreds of them. And so we would take out these EPs and we would put these albums on, sometimes full length albums that were kids albums. And, doesn't matter if it's Snoopy, like I said, Motown, gospel music. Now, I want to say there was a Black Sabbath album in there somewhere from my dad in Queen. But what was so interesting about it was I fell in love with classical music in that moment. Literally did. All of it, all of a sudden, I don't know why, but that's what spoke to me. And here's what's interesting. There's not much classical music in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. like there really just isn't.
No, I would imagine.
And I mean, the people back home that I grew up with, I grew up outside of a little town called Rocky Mount, Virginia. It's along the crooked, I want to say the Crooked Highway, which has a lot of bluegrass and country and stuff like that. And I used to play in those spots, like up at the Floyd General Store, and we all knew what Floyd Fest was, and so bluegrass and country and gospel country, and that more native Appalachian music that is spoken of, that type of stuff. That's what I grew up in. Well, that along with R&B and funk and stuff like that, and stuff on the radio. But how determination again, how they came into it, because I was so different from everybody else. At least that's what they said. And when you grow up as a child, you have different ways of looking at life, and sometimes you become more, solitary. I was the one that became more solitary, and so I was determined to learn as much about classical music as I could, to varying degrees of success based upon availability and knowledge. I'm especially that young. But it kind of brought me into a different sphere in which I looked at the art on either side of the fence or all around the fences from a very different perspective, because it wasn't what everybody else was listening to.
Right.
And it wasn't what everyone else was looking at or observing or noticing. So, yeah, being in the center kind of allowed me to transport myself through different places, because I would be accepted more by other people versus others. So I would be considered the good black guy, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Or the white black guy. And it was like, and that's both people saying this, that's both. And so it allowed me to kind of traverse like different spaces that may not be so readily available for someone of your skin color. And that's unfortunate, but it did give me insight. Yeah. And so, just different perspectives. But because I was also in the middle, like I had to be determined, my own self-determination was the most important thing. Who was Claude Allen Swain?
And that's a very good point. And
who is Claude Allen Swain? I guess that's the best way to put it.
In development, in all vulnerability, as men, part of the process and part of determination and striving as men, and as men of color, is you have to figure out who you are, because you can be pulled in so many different directions,
Mhm.
and not all of those directions are going to be good. And so what I found is, through my process, is I had to be okay and be comfortable in my own skin,
Yes.
whether white, black, or other. Obviously, I look the way I look. I'm a very intimidating man, and sometimes that can be perceived
Mhm.
other than what I want to be perceived as.
Right.
And so I had a lot of things I had to work past and work through in knowing who I am and knowing
Mhm.
myself. So I would imagine it would probably be the same way with you, even though we had very different paths.
Well, yes, that is true, and I tend to think the more I know you, your our path was more similar than not, because as we know, the kaleidoscope, the beautiful rainbow of Black American culture, um, it's very wide, it's broad,
Yeah.
and I only know this much of it because I just haven't had that experience. Now, you, on the other hand, have a much broader experience of it because of also being in football and athletics. Like you, yes, I touched on it and I played a little bit in school and all that type of stuff, like most boys did in basketball. I was more immersed in basketball, but at the same time, and I learned this with my experience with the great musicians of Dallas and living amongst them and being in South Dallas, where would be places that were, considered the ghetto. Like
Right.
that would be the outside perception of it. But I learned that even within the context of this beautiful culture that I still didn't that I am part of, but I didn't know all the nuances for, I still was only at the tip of the iceberg, and it's exciting because you come from a much deeper aspect just simply because of your skin color, which I think is interesting, I suppose.
Yeah.
At least that's what I imagine.
No, it's been quite the journey, and I like to think of myself as the most interesting guy in the room, because of all of the different interests that I've had in
Hmm.
throughout my life, and I never set any limitations on myself. And so, if anybody that knows me that, hey man, this guy does everything, or at least
Yeah,
I try to do everything.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think from my perspective, I think life is meant to be lived, and so why not try, at
Mhm.
least at the very least try, if you have an interest in it, or if it sparks something in you, give it a shot.
Absolutely.
Go forward. Why
Yeah.
not?
Well, absolutely. I was sitting here thinking, and this is going to sound terrible, but it's the truth. Um, both of us have always been told that we're so well spoken and so
Mm,
articulate.
mm.
Yeah.
Almost made me
I know,
spit out my
I know,
spit out my coffee.
I know. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but that's what kind of struck me as as you were talking, and so that's why I said I truly believe that I could be wrong, that our paths, our journeys were very similar, very very similar. It just depend. The overarching journey, I think, is similar. Maybe just the details are different.
Right,
The setting.
right.
You know.
So in getting to know Claude, I picked up, speaking about interests. I started, playing guitar, and I would like to say I'm self-taught. I don't have any formal training. I'm just online, trying to figure it out, playing around, noodling, as they say.
That's true.
And
That's a truism.
as I'm getting to know Claude, come to find out, Claude has been uh, all over the world traveling, playing with high level musicians and singers
Mhm.
and entertainers. So tell us a little bit more, something more interesting about those experiences.
It was all an accident.
Nothing is an
No,
accident.
no, I'm serious. It was kind of a little bit of an accident. I got hooked up with a bunch of guys when I was at Virginia Commonwealth University, and that included the likes of like um, crossing paths with people like D'Angelo and Questlove and those type of people. Like they were around. This was the scene. This was the scene. There's a music school there. Branford Marcellus taught saxophone at the school I was at. Like what's his face from Dave Matthews Band. He studied percussion there. I was fortunate enough to play a couple times with Nate Smith, like one of his brilliant jazz musicians like on the face of the planet. Like I actually played with him, though everyone in the room were like, oh my god, I was like, who's that guy? It's like he's only going to be here for a minute or two. Like, who's that guy? Now, I will never say that I am as good as those guys were. I've also played with many bandmates of Erica Baidu. Um, Run into BB King a couple times, guys like that. I didn't take it as seriously because why I say it was an accident. Now, as a guitarist, guitar was a joke to me. I was a horn player.
Mm.
I am classically trained in trumpet and French horn. Now, I left school early because I ended up getting gigs playing guitar, but man, I stunk. Like, I was not any good. I mean, I guess I was good, but and I started to learn a little bit more about like the skin colors and how that plays into effect, because that's around the same time as like Terrence Trent D'Arby and like Lenny Kravitz, who's still around today. There's discussions to be had about what that means. But at the same time, it did afford me an interesting opportunity, and I ended up basically teaching myself more guitar than not. I did take one jazz guitar class, and the teacher hated me because I was never there.
Well, let me tell you, he's downplaying and he's being very humble. I watched this man at his wedding play in front of a few hundred people. Prince, a rendition of Prince, which is extreme.
It was a medley, actually.
Okay, well,
it was a medley.
I'll stand corrected.
Yeah, it was a medley of Purple Rain and Let's Go Crazy.
And he absolutely killed it. So he is being very humble about his playing ability. Let me tell you, he is killing it out here. He has his own band. Tell us a little bit about your band.
Oh, well, I am fortunate enough to, and I think we should have an interview with all four of us at some point.
Actually, why not?
I was fortunate enough through just my pure luck when I was even asking you to be in my wedding. I kind of got one of those calls from a friend of mine. He's like, "Oh man, you're getting married. So who are you going to have play with you?" And I was like, "Oh, you're right. It's my wedding. I should play. I have this music." So when, as many artists do, and I hesitate to call myself an artist, but as a writer at times, you write from a place of pain. Usually that's a easily accessible emotion, loss and that type of stuff. And especially for me at the time. And having met my wife, Amanda, so many years ago in the airport in Fresno, which was totally out of control in the first place because I was not in a good spot. I was not. I was at the bar, 6 a.m. in Fresno Airport.
Right.
Eating a breakfast platter.
Well, obviously she was in the bar too at 6 a.m.
Well, no, I think she was just being nice to me because she's like, "Oh, this poor child," that type of thing. But I had decided to write my own music for my wedding. And I would actually would have done the whole show like that, except, I guess there are other people there and I had to I had to do stuff. But I wanted to write all the music myself. So in the course of all this stuff, I was able to connect with a brilliant musician, Zach Corneo. He's a young man, and I guess he's my age too, but he's a man that's from over in Morro Bay, Los Osos, that area. Mm-hmm. I think he's grown up basically around here, and I could be wrong, but that's where he lives now. John Bates and Thomas Cuff. And so I feel really, really fortunate to play with these gentlemen. It's just, there's a good synergy there. I'm in a good place in my life. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing. We're working on an album.
And we were just talking about today, might be headed up to the North Shore Festival.
Well, that's the goal. That's the goal. That's the goal. The goal is to play.
We're going to be determined.
Yes, that is the goal, to play the North Sea Jazz Festival. That's the goal. That's the goal. So that would be fun.
So that's a level of determination. That's the next level. And I believe he's going to get there. I have no doubt that he has the ability.
Oh, you do me too much.
No. If you know me, I don't mix words.
I know.
I say what I mean and mean what I say.
I'm just
So moving along,
yeah.
let's move into business. This is what you
Hmm.
do on a
Hmm.
daily basis. So you're a
Hmm.
business executive. So what
Hmm.
exactly does it entail? What that entail, and what do you do?
Well, I am now working independently as a consultant.
Okay.
In my past, I've worked as many venues as most recently commercial and business insurance. But I built networks for large telecommunications companies. So if you've ever made a phone call in the South or as part of the desert Southwest, or really actually kind of nationwide, there's a good high probability that I or an organization I was working with built that tower or touched that tower in some ways. So you take all those skills, and I took a lot of skills from the Marine Corps, being in logistics primarily and the planning phase of it, and coming from also a business family. I didn't study um, business in school. I wish I had studied finance and economics. I would have found it very probably much more interesting than music, believe it or not. But just for a day to day basis, I basically kind of keep the ship moving forward. You kind of keep the car between the lines.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's there are fiduciary responsibilities, of course. Those are to be taken seriously. But the way I try to end there are planning. There's things you got to be planning, like as far as materials management, resource management, all the type of stuff, whether it's human capital or product, or whatever that product is, the sales, the people, all that stuff, the schedules. I find that the most important thing I do actually is listen.
And so, how does listening help expand you in your line of profession?
Listening, if you truly try to listen with the I at least I feel with the idea of how I can help, how I can be of assistance,
Mm,
almost like in the sense of being a salesperson, right? So when part of sales is listening to your client and understanding where their pressure points are, and how you can fix them immediately, but then also projecting or considering what could be additional services you can add later on. So that requires a lot of listening. So I decided after a couple of very contentious events when I was working at Ericsson, although I loved Ericsson, I love the company, but just to, it is meetings, that type of
right.
stuff. I got reprimanded and I deserved it. And I've just decided over the years to learn from those type of experiences. So I'm starting to learn to listen to my staff, starting to learn to listen to other employees and like really listen to them. And I started with clients, and then I started with like teammates and stuff like that. But now, like moving into like more, um, and being more committed to being an executive, being the chairman itself, I'm discovering that the more I actually listen to the staff and the employees, the more I find out how to actually help them do their jobs better, to make them more comfortable.
Right.
So that's kind of what I think the major job is that I do now, is like actually just listen to whomever employees or the consult or the clients that I consult with, and just try to help them. And sometimes that does require listening to a lot of personal stories, but that also gives you a window into actually how to deal with those people and how to get the best out of them. At least that's what I think.
I agree. Yeah. Active listening, and what I believe what you're alluding to
Mm-hmm.
is is a skill. It's a learned skill,
Mm-hmm.
which many people are listening to respond instead of to say what they want to say, instead of actually having something meaningful to say.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and so it takes a humble and um, less ego driven person
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to be able to sit back and to assess without getting triggered, because obviously that is the reason why
Yeah,
most people don't want to listen, is because they're getting
yeah. We
triggered.
all get triggered,
Yeah.
and but please, by no means, I don't want anyone to think like I have a handle on all of this. Like it's a daily practice.
Right.
It's a daily practice. Like, and I fail constantly. Like I failed over the last couple of days because just life is. And so I found myself not listening as much to my wife as I needed to. And I think it's important to be able to acknowledge that to myself. So you know what, Claude, you're being like a total jackalope. So I almost said it, but I'll say jackalope like right now. And you're not truly mean to me,
Yeah.
but sometimes you have to try to make a self-assessment and continue to be a better listener, try to commit to that. And it's hard at times, but other times you find it surprisingly easy.
Well, awareness is the key. None of us are perfect at this. I fail at a lot of things. I like to think that I'm good at a lot of things, but I fail at a lot of things.
Yeah.
But failure doesn't makes room for growth. And if you're not willing to make the mistakes, how can you learn? If you're not willing to put yourself out there or extend yourself and increase your awareness, so a lot of people get that backwards.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, because of the fear based model and the perfectionist mindset.
Mm.
It actually kind of cripples people from extending themselves and putting themselves out there to be able to make mistakes, and that's the only way that you can grow.
Yeah, I just actually had there's probably been some study I've done this, or at least probably an essay or two. I wonder if, and again, this is an emerging thought in regards to capitalism.
Mm.
And the obvious narcissism that is, encouraged in these systems. And I'm not saying anything one way or another is for like pro or con, because there's pro or cons of everything. It's the system that we have now, but in regards to that, insofar as like, I guess your determination, your willingness to listen, I wonder, or to be an active listener, I wonder now if the way that our society is set up, from a socioeconomic standpoint, it actually discourages listening.
Dive deeper. Let's get into it.
Okay, so I guess like, I'm thinking this through. So these are all loose thoughts. So, but if you consider any media cycle, right? And it doesn't matter what side of fence I'm just talking about the straight, like the consumption of media,
Right.
advertising, all those type of things. The attention span for most people, what, 5-10 seconds, something like that?
Well, I think the active studies now, would suggest that the more recent studies now, it says it's less than 5, probably at 2.
Yeah, I was going to think something like, so the same amount of time, like, okay, so the same amount of time. Yeah, I know you hate football analogies, but I will say this: the same amount of time as a quarterback, you're supposed to sit in the pocket before you make your throw.
I think the quarterback has more time than people's
right. Then it's the person's attention span. So if you use a sports analogy, what is the best thing for a quarterback to do his job is to block out the noise, right?
That's right.
And so if you turned around and you say, like, just your everyday factory worker, waitress, waiter, driver, all of us actually, like any of us that aren't making decisions, so to speak, there is so much noise out there right now that all you can do is just think about what your job is, so you can put food on the table. So you lose awareness of the things that are happening around you. And so if you lose awareness of what's happening around you, then just like the pocket, you just go to where the pocket's being pushed,
right,
or you get crushed by it. So if you think about certain aspects of our financial systems, our socioeconomic systems, any of our system, any administrative system, where a person or group of people can exert pressure on your neutral position to move you left, right, forwards, or back, you could be susceptible of making decisions based upon not being aware enough of what's actually going on, right? Because you'd only have 5 seconds.
We can attribute some of that, I'm sure, to, like you said, the media and society as a whole has contributed a lot of this to this paradigm that we're living in now.
Mm-hmm.
And social media, I think, feeds that. Everybody's so used to
and that's
the quick dose of dopamine.
That's my point. So if you if you could think about it from another point of view, you could then say that certain economic systems create conditions in which there is so much noise you don't actually see which way you're moving.
That's right. Yeah. So what do you do in a situation like that where you're trying to actively listen, but people, just by the nature of what we're going through or we're dealing with in society, it is the exact opposite.
I don't know. I Because we are all susceptible to different levels of stress. We're
Yeah.
all and awareness and emotions and feelings and all this stuff. Our daily activities. We're all susceptible to varying, very, very, very fluid conditions, right?
Right.
So I don't know if there's really like anything that truly, there's no magic bullet, I guess is what I'm saying. Like it's not a penicillin. I'm not really sure what that methodology would look like. What I do know is this though, is that there's been so many studies, you have to just go look them up, mostly in European, I guess you would say, European countries like Denmark and places like that. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, I think Switzerland, a few of them. The ones that are a little bit more altruistic,
Yeah.
philosophical in their governance, they tend to value education and by educating their populace, they can make smarter decisions, right? And I distinctly remember when the Department of Education was talked about being defunded, continually being talked about being defunded here in the United States, which makes it's contrary to what you would think as far as to have a strong middle class, which is what supports like the idea of governance in the first place, a
Right.
strong middle class. So the constant bickering and the mess that's in the education system, and I'm not making judgments, but what I can actively wonder is this: has that had an adverse effect on our citizenry? And what has that looked like? I mean, because have you ever thought about this? Like, I mean, when the mixtape, when you needed to make a mixtape back in the day, you had to have a very special, like, player, at least in Virginia, like where I didn't have like all this stuff. Had to have like a special type of boombox to be able to record, and then sometimes like record to the other side, like it was a double deck type thing, like basically like a 4-track, like a little
Right.
2-track, 4-track type
Right.
thing, right? I used to actually record music, like playing with my hands and stuff like that, like making drum like cadences because I
Yeah.
was in the marching band. I used to do. I would like put the parts over top of each other. It was crazy. I was a little kid, like in the basement doing that crap. I really did that. But if you think about it from that point of view, we put a person on the moon not so long ago.
Right.
Um, as I've talked about in the past, like there's literally a fusion reactor, like north of here, like an actual fusion reactor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy to think about.
Most people don't even understand the significance of what you're saying right now when you're speaking about a fusion
Yeah, I mean,
reactor.
like a literal fusion reactor. I mean, that is mind-boggling for a multitude of reasons. But here's the thing that's depressing about that. At the same time, I do wonder if technology and education and access was more readily available, how much farther along would we honestly be?
Okay. So you don't think in that thought process that
Mhm.
information and access isn't available now? I think we have
No, but
way more access to information.
yeah, we do. But at the same time, it's tiered. So
Okay.
if you live in a metropolitan area or a very well or affluent area, the access you have to greater resources or better resources is much larger. It's wildly different than growing up in Appalachia, especially in like some of the states I had to traverse.
So you
Like,
don't think with the invention of the invention, right? Um, the expansion
mhm.
of the internet that hasn't been equalized?
No, no, not at all. No, no, and it's a business decision. I get it. Like there's a lot of business decisions there, um, and the amount of access that a child has to education, to information, especially if it can be verified as true, and like in at least having the ability to get it from an academic, like world, like actually truly academic, like not something. And I'm not saying anything about homeschooling or
Understand. I think I
Montessori,
understand what you're
but
saying.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like something that's structured and that's agreed upon. I think that being able to giving those students the access to that type of information, anybody, not just students, but like adults, to access to that information they can truly verify as being as factual as possible, and also having the equipment and the resources available to imagine and to create. I could only imagine what our lives would be like right now, because all of it's been so available. But how I know it's unavailable is there are initiatives that are well known in the federal government to bring infrastructure to, like, underrepresented communities. And that's part of what I did as far as working in some of those spaces. Like when I would build cell towers, they would be in rural areas that literally had no type of like wireless communication at all.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you're saying that these places are underserved because they're
Much
just,
very
yeah.
underserved.
Okay.
In fact, there was the great internet, not internet, but the great highway system through the Appalachia. That was part of a federal program back. I don't want to give a specific year, but it was right around. I can't recall if it's before World War II or it was. I believe it was after World War II, somewhere in that space. Um, there was a gigantic push by the federal government to build a highway systems that we enjoy now, the parkways and stuff like that, to bring more resources to underserved communities in the Appalachia. Like that's true.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's absolutely, like, that's very true, because the Appalachians, as beautiful as it is, it's also, as far as construction is concerned, it can be very treacherous. There's a lot of challenges.
Well, I mean, it's in the mountains, but
Right.
in the
Hmm.
Appalachian Mountains is
Hmm.
like very foresty,
Yeah, there's like any place else.
yeah,
Like,
woody,
it's, yeah,
know.
there's just challenges like you have to deal with, and especially back in those days, um, you know, even coming up into the nuclear age, much of the United States was still like coming into like the age of, like, like coal power and petroleum and stuff like that.
Right.
Like there were still varying degrees of access, the farther away you got from metropolitan areas.
Gotcha. Understood. Well, circling back,
Hmm.
you touched on some very key things, and we might have to talk about the nuclear fusion on a later date. That's a
Well, you should
deeper,
actually, well, you should bring in a real physicist.
man. That's a deeper, heavier conversation.
But dude,
We talked about it
yeah,
the other night
yeah, yeah.
offline, and how quantum physics actually comes into play, and what was once a kind of an imaginative thing, or something that we only could dream about, now is
Hmm.
becoming a reality.
Yes, yes.
And so that's a very heavy conversation, which I, personally, I don't know enough about to really speak on, and to
Mhm.
educate the public on that. You have greater skill and ability to kind of dissect and
Yeah,
to deliver that information. So I'll bring you on. We'll talk about that at a later
yeah. I
date.
mean, I would love to.
But just imagine that we're getting out of the nuclear age and we're getting into this quantum.
Yeah, I guess that is an interesting question. I hadn't thought about it like that. So fission, that's new. That would be considered nuclear, I guess. I mean, technically, fusion is a nuclear reaction too. I
It's
mean,
supposed to be like a cleaner type of.
yeah, it's
Uh,
it's a completely different thing. Yeah, it's opposed to splitting an atom, you combine an atom, and that gives off enough energy to, if it's self-sustained, and you could use it as a power source.
yep, I don't know nothing about that. All I know is they dropped a bomb and it blew people up, and
Yeah,
it
exactly.
incinerated some
Yeah,
things.
it's like really, really ugly. It
So,
may have created Godzilla.
hey,
Which
you,
is,
I just read an article the other
uh-huh.
day.
Mhm.
Actually, no, not even the other day. Today, about how in Australia right now, great whites are ending up on the beach bitten in half, like literally.
Oh, well, that's killer whales, man.
No, no, no. And the whales,
Oh,
surprisingly enough, are beaching themselves because they're trying to get away from whatever is eating these great whites.
oh, come
Like,
on now.
no, I'm serious,
Come
man.
on,
You know,
come
so
on.
there's so
So you're gonna tell me
from what I heard,
the Meg is real?
you know, I don't know. I originally thought the
Megalodon,
Meg. I originally thought,
the
but
megalodon. Do you realize how big that thing would be? You could not
hey,
hide that.
what else would it be? What else would it be? You know,
It's not the Loch Ness monster, man. Come on.
no. What else? So the
Okay.
argument was.
I'd have to see it. I don't know.
I'm just telling you what the
You know
article
what?
said.
You believe everything the
Hey,
interwebs
you
has
know,
to say
hey,
to you?
you know,
Everything?
I read a lot of information. I read a lot of information. And, you know, I
I'm not saying stop
call it a conspiracy.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say from a certain point. I don't know. I mean, Antarctica is right next door. Not really, but
well, you know, the argument was funny. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't believe it or not believe it. Hey, it is what it is. Something's happening, and there's a huge vastness of the ocean that we've never explored.
Well, yeah, I mean, and honestly, the more crazy thing is the amount of fresh waters in the ocean now.
Yeah, I've never heard
that's
that.
Not good. That is so not good. Because, well, at least as far as what our ecosystem is going to go through. Like, there's balances that are being shifted now. And so, I guess it's just part of evolution, obviously. Not necessarily natural evolution in the sense of how it's been before, but I think we should probably start considering, this is an emerging thought too, at least for me, maybe we should just now start considering what our effects as mankind could be on the planet and then try to find ways to deal with that. Like, okay, so like the same thing with petroleum, right? Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing about petroleum outside the whole electric and the batteries and stuff like that is the infrastructure that's already in place. That's many trillions upon trillions of dollars of investment that can't just be easily displaced just because someone says, oh, now your iceberg is gonna, like, that's not.
Yeah, and let's go to the electric. Yeah, everybody needs to drive an electric car now. You know?
So I think, like, from a certain point of view, we have to just bear in mind, not saying to stop as many technologies as we can to being green, but it's a mindset sometimes. Like, now that we know that we are like hilariously incapable of being able to make a mutual, like, you know, educated decision. Like, it's actually comical.
Come on, we can't all get along. What's that? What's going on with that?
Bad. It's just hilariously bad. Like, it just is. So if you take that into consideration, I'm really big on like changing your mindset in that space, because now you operate from a space of saying, okay, I know this guy I can't talk to, right? And so you make adjustments for that.
You know, we were talking about little microaggressions, and today we were talking about microaggressions, yes. And that's a very kind of pertinent, you know, piece of little information as far as when you're talking about mindset. You'd think that we're in some ways we're beyond this. You know, we're on the path of the Terminator now, you know, with Neuralink. Hey, you know, whatever that means for humanity at this point is whatever that means. But I mean, we're on a path somewhere, and people are having these little microaggressions because of lack of awareness, stress.
Yeah, stress is a huge one.
Not having, you know, social awareness, not even having emotional intelligence for that matter. You know, what would you suggest moving forward? How do we?
Well, you know, the easy answer is to cut off all the electricity.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm saying that, like, not literally cut off all the electricity.
I know what you
mean. Well, and I really don't even mean like that. I say it's this. Yes, again, I kind of changed we were talking about Ready Player One, that movie,
Right.
and how that changed a lot of dynamics in which people operate, because that's true. Like, if you've ever played an online game and being in those chat rooms or those spaces where they can communicate with each other, like, there's levels of etiquette that are developed, and you're always going to have bad actors in those levels of etiquette. And so what I'm saying is like, in the same sense, it's all going to sort itself out the way it's supposed to. For me personally, I like to just get away from technology as much as I can, um, and try to interact with people on a personal level. But again, I'm a 50-year-old man. I didn't grow up like with video games in the same manner that other people do. But I do know this: when I was going through my pain from my partner Holly passing, I did find solace in spaces like NBA 2K. Believe it or
Mm,
not, I actually did. Um, and it's terrible to admit that, but at the same time, it was a world I could escape into and I had control over.
right. You're able
Mm-hmm.
to kind of thrust your awareness into something that is
Right. Yeah.
your consciousness.
And so I became, and it's crazy to think about. But to answer your question about like how do people become more engaged, I think it's just the way that we engage has changed. And so we need to figure out how to adjust for that. Again, this is an emerging thought for me as an old guy, like just being put on the spot thinking about it. But yeah, that's kind of what I think.
And we have some really deep conversations, and these are some of the thoughts that I think about, in my ponderings and my meditations
Mm-hmm.
about consciousness and awareness. And so you explained it from the Ready Player One perspective, which isn't vastly different from the way I've kind of viewed things as kind of the matrix kind of ideal of the
Mm-hmm.
consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And us being, yeah, we inhabit a body, and so we're in the player one position, but really there's a consciousness that is in third person that is outside looking in
Mm-hmm.
and is able
Yeah.
to kind of view the whole picture.
Right.
And sometimes we forget because we're so close to it. As the old folks say, is you're too close to the fire to see
Mm-hmm.
to see
Yeah.
the
That's
bigger
it.
perspective.
Right.
And sometimes when we're so close and we're in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
we can't zoom out
Right.
into that third person and view on the inside and see that really all of these things and these little situations, microaggressions and issues, what we call issues, if we just allow it to unfold, it's going to work itself out the way it's going to work itself out. But we're so close that we get burnt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the danger of anything. I look at stuff working out the way they're supposed to. I mean, it's still active participation, but like within the context of a genus group, right? Within the context of like a species, like despite all of our beliefs and all this type of stuff, it's going to work out the way it's just going to work out. Now we can be active participants in that, or we can be bystanders. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to that. So at least for me, and so when I take that into consideration, that's what makes me more determined. Again, I threw it out there, but
There you
make
go.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, I actually constantly try to do that one. I guess that's why I got caught up. But it make me actually more determined to figure out what's important to me, because I realize there are fewer years in front of me than behind me.
Yeah. A lot of us like to think that we are going to live forever. And
Mm-hmm.
in Stoicism, they have this saying, it's called memento mori. And in short, basically, that means that we will die or you will die. And it's just a remembrance that as you're walking this every day, that understanding that you may not have another day, you only
That's very
have
true.
that day, that moment
Mm-hmm.
in time to make whatever that moment is. And that's kind of that theme of stoicism. That's what you're alluding to. A lot of cultures and a lot of religions, Christianity alludes to it. Buddhism alludes to it. Taoism alludes to it. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of religions allude to understanding that this is just a flash in a moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
So
and as we were talking about the other evening, uh, when you put that in the context of the vastness of the universe, and then like the whole and like and like that's what was interesting about that conversation,
Man.
and not because of the because we didn't get into the technical aspect of it, because that's a math equation, and like, well, lots of math equations, like there's ways to mathematically explain these things, but that's again why it's so important to me, um in all things that I'm doing, to find a greater purpose for myself and how I wish to achieve that nirvana, that's that hope for some type of eternal peace,
Right.
like that, like when we close our eyes and we don't know if there's anything on the other side of it, like at least you close your eyes feeling like you did everything you could, I guess, or that you wanted to, or whatever, I guess whatever that looks like for you. But for me, it's for like, how do I make these moments much more pleasant?
Right. Right. And and I believe that suffering is part of the human experience. I think a lot of people want to um, move around or get around that aspect of living, but that is part of the overall
But that's what
experience.
makes the virtual world so interesting to everyone, because you can't get physically hurt.
Ah, ah.
And that's why I said it's very interesting to see what that ends up looking like, because when you think about it, see, we're talking about detachment, right? And we in some cases probably have robots fighting robots in these
So he took it
wars.
there.
And so, but I'm just saying, no, I'm not trying to get down like a conspiracy theory, but I mean, but like drones, right?
Right.
Like drone attacks are literally, or like, yes, we control them, but at some point you can put in a programming. I mean, it could be Terminator type stuff. Like it could be like, the Wayland Corporation type stuff. Like, we can try to pretend like it's not going to happen, but it's already happening. That being that we have to think about artificial intelligence. We're already talking about that. And if you start taking the convergence of our consciousness into artificial intelligence, yes, it sounds nuts, but it's not really that far off from a certain point of view.
So he is confirming that there are Terminators out there.
No, they're not. I don't know if there's actually Terminators, like in a sense that we talk about Terminators, but I mean, again, it's going to come. There's a lot of things that have to take place, like a huge advancements in metallurgy and computing power and processing power and just actually power in general, um, to generate the amount of complexity it would need to move a consciousness into some type of like machine, basically. But there have been attempts to do it, like from a certain, like in certain aspects. I mean, that's essentially what AI is like, at least from my understanding of it. You could kind of look at like we're programming this thing we're programming, I hate to say thing, but we're programming something to have as many tools to and much data to review as possible to make cognitive decisions based upon command. So it's like when you talk about learning from itself, yeah, that all can happen, but we're actually teaching it how to learn from itself.
So in theory, I mean, we like to think, or not like we like to think, but there's people that think that AI is sentient.
I
But
think it could eventually be.
but if
I don't think it is now,
if
but
it's
I could be
still a
wrong.
program
Mm-hmm.
and it needs us to be the programmer,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't that force us to evolve? So it would never be sentient unless we are able to evolve along with
Well, I
that.
think it's like anything else, though. There's always going to be a push of the envelope as far as we possibly can. And so, regardless of whether you or I may feel, though, there are safeguards. Um, from another person's point of view, those safeguards aren't necessary because of whatever reason. So, I mean, and also when you started thinking about self awareness, wow, I mean, that's like that could be a very interesting question as far as like artificial intelligence is concerned, because I don't know what would then call. I mean, I can see how it could be done. like from a certain, like I hate to keep saying a certain point of view, but yeah, I can see how it can be achieved. I mean, you could have enough programming in there to where it can start develop awareness. I mean, I can see how it could happen. I mean, I've watched the Terminator.
How far off do you think we are from I mean things vastly changing? I mean, look at where we were 10 years
Yeah, I
ago
think it's
and look where we are now.
I think we're honestly on the precipice of the space age, like the true space age. Um,
So Donald Trump, as we like to make him out to be, as crazy isn't as crazy as we think he is with that space force.
no, that's not him though. Like that's those type of things. That takes decades of commitment to do things. And so, yeah, maybe he was there, like kind of administering over, but that already been in place for a long time. The United States Air Force has been doing space operations for decades. You know,
Mm,
NASA does space operations. Like it's all like everyone does. So, you know, at some point it was going to peel off. It's that has nothing to do with the presidents.
gotcha. Okay.
I mean, Kennedy did start, you know, the Navy SEALs. That's true. But I don't, I don't, it's something that, but that's like a very specialized department. Like a whole forest, that, no, that takes decades of planning. That's not just something you just do.
Well, Claude, you are a very interesting man.
Is our time
And
up?
no, the time is not
Oh, okay.
up.
I was
But
gonna
we're
say, wow.
moving into another segment of the show right now,
I was enjoying
of
that
this talk.
conversation.
No, it's very highly engaging.
All right.
But we're going to keep this moving along. You know,
Okay. Okay.
let's tackle some other subjects here.
All right.
I mean, you're a highly interesting man. You know, you've done a number of things. And, you know, even speaking about NASA, I know you did a stint of work with NASA as
Yeah, it
well.
was my very first job that
Y-
I did. I
Well, see, there
was.
you go.
It was so stupid. Like I didn't like my dad was kicking me. I was getting kicked out of school. My dad wasn't going to pay for anything. He's like, "You get a job, dummy." you know, basically what he told me. It's like, so I walked down to the bottom of the God, Randall Hall, I think is what it's still it's called. Or maybe it's Ken Hancock, but I think it's Randolph. Anyway, fluids and mechanics room, building, whatever it was back in the day, and I answered I picked up an internship thing, like, you know, a paid internship thing. Ever, you know, the old job boards, and I remember going up to see the professor who was he was a dean of school, and he looked at me. He's like, he's like, you do not qualify for this program at all. He told me that. He told me that straight to my face, and he was right. I mean, he was right. He said, "Bob, I'll let you in." Yeah, it's so we went down. I went down to that was my very first paid job. I worked as an intern for like a little project in Virginia Tech with NASA and the Air Force.
Wow.
We were studying wing edges, and like we had models and all kinds of stuff. It was pretty cool, man. I built
Yeah.
circuit boards, and I had to go through code. See, do you take? See, now you're
See,
getting all nostalgic.
no, no,
It's cool.
I'm convinced that this dude is CIA.
No,
You know, hey, I know the type, man. I've been around people like you. Yeah, I know the type, man. You know, real quiet, don't
I'm not
say
very
much.
quiet though.
You know, I don't know. You have quiet moments. Got that glisten. I get that glisten in your eye. Hey, man. Hey, look, I've been around killers.
Oh
I'm
man,
kidding. I'm
I was gonna
kidding.
say, where's he at?
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Who he be?
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Uh,
Man, you know, all of those
mhm,
experiences made you the man that you are. And you did touch on
mhm.
mentality, which, you know, really a lot of my channel is on mindset and how to, you know, have those mental hacks, those things that are going to push you forward, are going to thrust you forward. And obviously, nobody is perfect at this process. You know, I'm not perfect at it. You know, so but I offer service to people. You know, sometimes we forget that it's not just about us; it's bigger than that.
That's true.
And even speaking about the TEDx, you know, myself selfishly wanted to just do this to um, thrust myself forward,
Mm-hmm.
thrust my career forward. And now this has turned out to be way bigger. And now I'm actually looking at it from a standpoint of service to others, not only in the performance, but also in helping the speakers, do an awesome, phenomenal job in the message that they're going to give to the people. So tell us a little bit about where you're going with this, why you uh, are rallying behind the theme of determination, and give us a little synopsis of what you might be speaking about.
Um, First and foremost, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity for these platforms in the first place. That is not does not go unnoticed, and it is much appreciated, especially to me, some old dude like that, just does stuff. Just, but that's seriously. I think that's first of all, you have to have a degree of selfishness in order to pursue any type of work that helps people in the first place, because you have to take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to be that guy with a capital G, a capital U, a capital Y, the guy, right?
Right.
And you have to have a certain degree of arrogance in order to do that. I think where it diverges is like, what is your end goal? And so that's just a credit to you. So you should give yourself credit for that, in my opinion. Now, as far as TEDx is concerned, I suppose determination has always been something that has existed in me, and we had spoke at length about self-determination.
Right.
And so I'm kind of moving in the direction of self-determination through um, your music and your art. And I'm not gonna, and I'm not, I'm not a guy that has like, the resume, the pedigree, and all the other stuff like old bandmate, that has
Yeah.
like he's done
Yeah.
all these things. Like I did not notice about him when we were playing with him. He was a master student already.
Really.
Yes, like I've learned that recently. He marched beside a friend of mine at JMU studying music, and then he came over to VCU. That being Nate
Yeah.
Smith. He came over to VCU, and that's where I met him when I was in the composition and conducting schools for trying to get into those schools, because I had to start off as a general music major because I just transferred in. But he was, I think, already in like his master's jazz classes or something like that. I just recently learned that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so I don't necessarily have always like pedigree in that sense, but I was around a lot of these people a lot. And I've played a lot, and I've also taken a lot of time off at the same time. And one of the things that's always came back has been my music.
That's a part of you.
Yeah, it's like it's a part of me. So it's part of my self-determination.
Yeah.
Like I said, when I was a young age, I realized that was truly the bee's knees for me.
And that's a high level of self-awareness as well, to understand, that is my path. That is what developed you into the man that you are today. Even putting it down,
Mm-hmm.
you always tend to kind of fall back into what was your passion.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And this may be part of TEDx, but if not, I'll just tell you now. Part of the healing process when I got back from the wars in the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
I threw my guitar in the back of my truck, and a Forerunner, distinction there. Forerunner. Put my guitar in the back of my farm because trucks hold a special place in my heart. I'm a farm guy, you don't just take a truck out. Like I don't believe that. I mean, people do it, but trucks for work. Like that's on the farm. That's when you got stuff to do. I'm going around the country. I can be in an SUV. So anyway, that's my little rant about trucks.
Hey, I drive a big old monster truck,
yes,
so
you
don't have
Optimus
to. You don't have to
Prime.
convince me.
Optimus Prime is what I call it. Optimus Prime. It's good. But but part of my healing process was playing in these blues clubs. all over the nation. Like I would find like the dingiest, like crappy bar that had like I could sit in with the blues band. I'd pay him like, 20, $50 out of my pocket. Like, hey, can I sit in with you for like a few songs? And I did that and I drank and I fought and I did all this stuff that like, you're not supposed to do. And I
Right.
somehow walked out of it. So, you know, when you do all that and you start to wonder, why do I keep doing that? John brought up to me last night. We were doing this, doing a piece that I wrote. And then he came out, this piece was effing hard, man. I was like, geez, John. But we were actually starting to lock in. And he said, in his John way, he said, man, why don't you take, he said, this is what we're doing. Like, this is a lot of determination, dude. He's like, and he just kind of reminded me of like all the stuff I did. And like we were still like putting together this music that was crazy hard. Not really hard, but like the tenors of it. They had played it at the wedding in which I sang so badly because we were so sick. But we're now all starting to get well. And so you're starting to see the boundaries of where it can go.
Right.
And so that's kind of part of what my determination has always been, was to be a composer. Right. That was always, and maybe I will fail at it still, but I'm still trying.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and that's all that we can really do is move forward and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But you're putting yourself out there,
Yeah.
and
And so like within that space, you have to have a certain level of determination. You have to be able to commit to rehearsal, to practices. And, not everyone's going to do it all at the same time. But taking that example and applying it to your own life, when I talked about changing the rules of the game within your mind, your mindset within that,
yeah,
for me, it's like, okay, these are the rules that I know that exist. Now, how can I break those rules? And so the only way to be able to do that is you actually have to learn the rules within that system, whatever that system is, or at least as much as you can to figure out how to break them. But if you get so drawn off track because you're distracted in that 5 seconds.
what I'm keying in on from a lot of what you're saying right now, which is a huge factor why I chose the theme of determination at the time. I didn't know, like I said, selfishly, I was just doing just to be doing.
Mhm.
And so I didn't know how this was going to kind of work out and flow. And now it's kind of taken on a life of its own. Um, but in that, I just knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do, and somehow it was going to unfold the way that has been unfolding. And so that's how I knew. And the theme of my life has always kind of been, taking action.
Yeah. The more I had learned about you and where you came from and how you ended up here in San Luis Obispo, I'm choking right now.
Right.
I'm not. I was like I was coughing. I wasn't trying to make it sound like a certain way, but for either of us to be here in San Luis Obispo,
Yes.
is an interesting story in and of itself. But I think for you, I am fascinated about learning the decisions that, because you didn't have to be here, and so learning the context in which you made those decisions are interesting to me. Not just the fact of decisions of themselves, like the reasons why, and then how
Mhm.
you viewed that. And so I think it's a very interesting story to tell. I think you're one of the most interesting dudes I know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, determination has been the theme of my life. Being the theme of what we're going to be, this event, what we're putting together. um in every one of the speakers, what I'm finding out as I'm speaking with them and having these more intimate conversations is because we all go through things, we all have obstacles and situations that we have to try to overcome. But what's so special about this event is I feel like everybody has a very special something that they have to bring to the table, that a message to give to the people about how what they went through has is something that they can deliver to somebody else
Right.
to get.
How,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. The
you
example
get what
that
I'm
it
saying.
sets. The example that, well, and that's why I was so honored that you asked me to do this, because I guess technically I do that every day in business anyway.
Yeah.
Like you have to allow yourself to have some type of vulnerability to like certain employees, to certain staff members, you know, and that takes a level of awareness and, self-confidence, self-determination, I guess you could say, like determination to be present. And I think at times it's hard to even be present for ourselves.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. But that's goes back to what we're talking about. There's so much distraction, and people's attention span is so
Yeah.
small, and people aren't listening. They're just, going through their mental process and whatever is happening in there, and they're not even present to enough to be able to understand what's going on around them.
Yeah. Yeah. Just trying to live our lives, really.
Right. And that's what's actually what the whole thought process of TED, now as I'm diving deeper as an event coordinator and planner, the whole idea of TED was just that, to get some of the most, influential people, the leaders in their field, the thought the thought leaders, the innovators, people who can capture somebody's attention, and to get them together so they can talk about these ideas
Mm-hmm.
and put it on a platform to engage people.
Yeah, that's I've given that a lot of consideration actually lately. The weight of responsibility that a position like this can have,
Yeah,
and as a speaker as well. Who knows if anyone would actually give two craps about what I say, right? Maybe someone does, but what do they take from it, right?
right,
And so I realized that well, not really early on, but I realized that when I first became a band leader when I was out in Texas, like when I was the lead whistle, like it was my music, which was different, very, very different. I had never thought about it like in such a forward position. I was always like the hired gun, right? No one cared who I was, as long as I played.
right.
That was how I felt anyway. Um, but when you were the lead whistle, um, suddenly people were paying attention to every word you were saying.
Right.
And I'm like, and I was thinking about some deeply personal things up there, right? But then people take those and they go in any direction they want to. So the same thing with TED X is that I want to take this as seriously as I can in a lot of ways, because your words can have effects on people.
Yes, absolutely.
And so like, it's always been said, the penny is mired in the sword, all that type of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it is.
And to be an amazing speaker, as I'm developing in my own skills in speaking and delivering messages, and engaging people, what you have to find, what I found to be significant, is being present. Because the more you're in your head, and the more you're more concerned about what's happening there, instead of delivering the message,
Mm-hmm.
servicing someone else, the less effective you're going to be. And people can feel that.
Yeah,
People can
yeah,
feel when,
yeah.
it's bigger than you being just nervous. I think if people can appreciate, okay, well, he's a little bit nervous, but they can also feel when you're not sincere about what you're saying, you're not believing about what you're delivering.
Yeah. There was a musician, I don't recall his name, but he was out of Chicago, and he did an interview with some magazine. I'm not sure if it was like to this level of Rick Rolling Stone or something, but it was a trade magazine, music magazine. And he talked about when he was writing that he realized he had to be brutally honest. Because at least for him, he wasn't able to convey any sort of genuine emotions. And so the audience would pick up on that. And so I remember I really internalized that, because I was one for not having to consider that at all, and then not wanting to share. But I think that the music that that I played and created with those guys down there and those ladies down there, like it was probably some of the most powerful stuff because I was, at least for me personally, like I put everything in it, you know, and so it gave you credibility. Like people could find you to be a genuine person, like someone who's suffering or is just happy as they are.
There is a level of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have an ebook. That's not a plug. But I do have an ebook. It's on Amazon, streaming everywhere.
That was a plug.
Yes, that was plug. That was plug. But the title of it is, 7 ways to lead authentically. And which if you really think about the title, you can't lead if you're not first leading yourself. And there's certain themes of your life you just have to be real about. I think people can appreciate when you're just as honest with yourself as you're wanting them to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And you have to, approach the situation with, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm not claiming to be, but these are the things that I've learned along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, people really connect with you. So when you're
Yeah.
sitting on stage, whether you're playing music or you're delivering a speech, I think you can express that in a way that people are going to connect with you.
Yeah, because I was thinking about this. So I've done like some cool stuff. But this is the first time like I've gotten on stage solo like this, right? Well, not the first time, but it's been a long time. Like I did an acting stint once.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning some new things myself here.
Okay, so this was so weird. Typical Claude story. I was at the studio and I was trying to scrape up some extra bucks working for like the owner and just odd jobs because there was a downturn in telecom and I was a broken mess. I was writing an album and I was like basically living in the studio all the time, like constantly writing. It was crazy. It was nuts. Like that's not
you were
healthy.
in the zone.
No, it's not healthy. Let's just be honest. That is not a healthy environment to have to be, at least for me. And somewhere along the line, I ran into this director, and he was putting this play, and I don't know why I did it, but I said, hey, I'll try for the play. Why not? I mean, it's the worst thing you have, and they're going to say no. I mean, that
Right.
I expected that, right? I expected no. And I found out what the subject matter was, and there's a point to this story. So I found out what the subject matter was. The subject matter was about an incident that Rocky, that was the director's name, he had an incident in which he had been confronted by police.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if all of it within the play itself was true or relevant, but the overall tenor of the play was he had a pretty scary incident with the police officer. He actually explained the story to me, but God, I was probably drunk and high at the time, so God knows if I internalized all of it, but I did get a lot of it. So this was it was debuting at the Bass Hall, not too unlike the Pack.
Interesting.
Yeah, like it's a pretty legit spot. I don't know if like you could do like full-fledged orchestras and stuff like we can do at the Pack and like the ring cycle and all that crap, but like it was big, like it was pretty big a theater, and the Dallas News was going to review it and everything. Yeah, they did, and somehow I became the lead.
Interesting.
I was supposed to be the understudy, and I love this guy today. His name's Carl. Carl was fantastic. Like, I don't know why I got chosen to play. Like, I was just like, okay, I'm a guitarist, sort of, not really. I'm a brass player, right? And I'm this guy just sitting in the studio trying to write like epic rock songs about, all the shit that happened to me. Excuse me, that was true. All the stuff that happened to me, over in the war in the family and all this stuff, life stuff, right? Anyway, so I did this play, and it was really hard for me because I had to tap into some really significantly deep seated and buried emotions in order to pull it off. Because I was actually too
It's
violent.
called method
I was
acting.
actually too violent.
Yeah.
Like the other guy who was like the protagonist, he's like, "Wow, you just got like," because I got really physical. It just happened. Like I had to kind of like learn how to try to act within that space, which was, and it was a stressful situation. It was a lot of physical acting.
There's actually a name for that. I can't think of the name of it,
Yeah, I
but
don't know
yeah.
it either because I'm not really an actor. Like I'm not trained. I don't understand like all
Yeah.
those things, but I did it. And here was the interesting thing. We read the review. I think it was my second night they came, or it was like one of our rehearsals, or I forget what it was. They basically liked the play for the most part, but they found my character not believable.
Really?
And we know why. Carl's much the same skin color as you.
Mm, gotcha. Understood.
Interesting, isn't
That
it?
is very interesting. You know, in keeping with that, that thought process and perspectives.
Mhm.
What people think um, we are, is vastly different from how it actually is.
Yes.
And it's funny when we are actually in our authentic self. They don't believe that that's real. That can't be that person because of the tapes
Mm-hmm.
and the mental loops and the perspectives and the biases that they have about what it means to be
Whomever.
whomever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's that's important to acknowledge, you know. I think it's important to acknowledge first yourself so that you can grow and try to provide forgiveness and guidance like to those that you care for or as best you can or try to be of a help,
Yeah.
understanding them because I'm not saying that it isn't hard, but I think that's like the very first responsibility if you can get that awareness of yourself and understand why someone's going to have a bias.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to understand.
As myself
Yeah.
is um although admittedly, so I've been in the past, I've also been on the opposite side, very hyper aware of what people are thinking and feeling, where it's crippled me.
Yeah, because what's interesting about that because that's fear driven.
Absolutely, it is.
And
Absolutely.
I was kind of looking at your we're both Star Wars fans, so I'm looking at your Yoda picture here. Train yourself to let go of everything you
Absolutely,
fear to
yes,
lose.
yes,
And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so many facets to that in that awareness either way. But I think that's part of the journey. At least for me, it is.
deeper conversation. It delves into the realm of codependency.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older and becoming more aware of who I am and being okay and comfortable in my own skin, you would think, looking at me being a physical presence,
Yeah.
um, that I wouldn't have, or I wouldn't have had those type of insecurities about what somebody might be thinking and feeling about me.
Mm-hmm.
And and it may not always have been obvious, and sometimes it was a lot of subconscious and unconscious things that was
Sure.
going on inside of me. Like, why am I lowering my voice to make somebody feel bigger or less intimidated because I'm bigger than them, or I carry
Yeah,
that
I mean that's
presence?
yeah, that's a different
That's
thing.
those
That's a
it's
different
it's
thing.
things like that looking back, you have to say to yourself, and what was happening with me at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and why did I feel like I had to do that? And that was because I was being programmed to think that that wasn't the presence that I brought wasn't good enough,
Sure.
and I had to act like somebody else so they can be comfortable.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, and with growth and with awareness now, I'm understanding more that that's not in the true definition of codependency, but it is part of the definition of codependency is where you're really just and you have a hard time being authentic when you have those codependency issues.
Yeah. In our relationships to our social structures. Um, and because I thought that was a very interesting analogy, codependency. But our our personal relationships to our cultures, our communities, our social groups, civic groups, all those type of things. And there is an element of codependency on it. And I guess it just
Absolutely.
depends on which one is more influential upon you and what vein of that influences are you more prone to following.
And you're a professional. I'm a professional.
Mm-hmm.
So you find yourself, you're in these professional environments,
Yeah.
and instead of speaking what you feel like you have to um, temper the message, so to speak. And I just did it right there, just
Mm-hmm.
try to find the right words to say, and so I'm not offending anybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of that. I wish I had been better about it at times.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone has those same sentiments. I guess like I'm not sure if there's a question there, but what I'm gathering as we're talking is about those those
It's
things
tough.
that,
It's
those
hard to
things,
define.
those
Yeah.
things that we have to do, those concessions that you have to make in order to get along with another person at times. And I guess that's also okay. So that's what I mean. So that's interesting. It kind of comes back to what we were talking about. So when you have to make these concessions and you notice that there's no effect, no positive effect, that's when you have to say to yourself, okay, I know I can't talk to that person actually and get anything done. And so that's what I meant about within human development.
Yeah. It's
It's,
developing a certain level of emotional
it's
intelligence.
to
Yeah.
understand that
Yeah.
there's other people that you cannot communicate, but you have to be intelligent within yourself, or at least have enough self-awareness to realize when you've crossed the line or when you need to be more forward,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
It is, and it's hard sometimes,
Mhm.
in those situations,
I think so.
because we are programmed, traditionally we're programmed to think that conflict is bad, or conflict means that this person is not going to respond to me favorably, or we're not going to come to a resolution, or
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I found is, like you said, because if you don't engage with the conflict, typically you're, unconsciously, a lot of people start to lose respect for you anyway, just
Yeah.
because they know.
Yeah. It's like you're not present.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, yeah. I mean, you're not present. You're not truly aware of the situation, good or ill. And so you were just sort of discounted,
Yes.
which I mean, which could point to why a lot of people feel such desperation in our societies,
Yeah.
because then suddenly they realize they're being discounted.
And you can't grow.
Right.
You're not growing, and
yeah.
that
It's
it's one of those situations,
it's
and
just,
I've done it all the time. I used to wear it.
just a mess, isn't it?
Yeah. You have a situation,
Mm-hmm.
or situations, and I wish I had a done.
See what happened was.
um, and we're being funny, but you take those situations, maybe at work or with your spouse or your significant other, and instead of engaging and being completely authentic to the situation, and being present to the moment, you don't engage, or you don't involve yourself in the conflict because you're trying to appease the other person, and really your value isn't wrapped up in what that other person is how that other person is going to respond. The value is just the value. You are who you are. And so you're able to come to the table with your thoughts, feelings, expressions,
Mm-hmm.
and in a safe place. And if you aren't in a safe place, then like you said, maybe you need to remove yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, but the part of the conflict conundrum is if you don't do it, you can't, you're robbing yourself of the opportunity of growth.
Yeah, well, I think I think it's for whom it's concerned. Like, which hill are you willing to die on?
Again, pick and choose your battle. See, we say these things
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that perpetrates that whole thought process of, well, you may not want to engage that.
Well, because then you still have to do. I mean, you still have to do like got to do the math. Like, you got to figure out like what is that going to? How is that? What particular point of view is worth an ascribed value? What is that ascribed value to that particular point of view or that particular action? Like overall, and so that's hard to get to at times. And so, like within the moment, I tend to believe more stick towards your guns with like with room for some flexibility. You just got to have all the proof. But even then, some people just can't talk to.
This is true. There's this book, and I just finished it. It's called Crucial Conversations.
Mm.
I couldn't give you the name of it right now, but look it up. It's called Crucial Conversations.
Oh,
And basically it talks about just that. And there was another book that I'm working my way through. It's called Self-Esteem, the 7 Pillars of Self-Esteem. And they both kind of touch on the same ideas.
mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I found so interesting is exactly what we're talking about right now is we're living in a society where there's a lot of codependency, narcissistic relationships.
Yes.
And those two are attracted to each other for those reasons. One feeds the other, and the other one feeds the other one back. And unless you're willing to have those crucial conversations, but you have enough self-esteem in order to come to the table and be and realize part of self-esteem is one. There's two parts of self-esteem: is self-concept and self-efficacy.
Okay.
And self-concept is my value is me. I'm here. I'm present.
Mm-hmm.
And self-efficacy is the ability to know that because I'm here, I am myself and I am valued, that I have the ability to tackle whatever may come my way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also what builds your self-esteem. So you have to engage the situation first.
Yeah, of course.
Understanding who you are, that you bring enough value to the situation to have a crucial conversation and understand that, I can deal with whatever is going to come my way, and I'll deal with it as it comes.
Yeah.
But a lot of us, one, we can't define that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't change something that you're not willing to face, especially if you don't have a definition for it.
Something that was occurring to me as you were discussing this, as you're talking about this, a lot of self-confidence is created in the education system.
Agreed.
Because you get the tools of critical thinking, like in a robust, and I'm not saying that that we had a robust, like not at all. I mean, it wasn't that bad. Well, yeah, it was. I mean, it was bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's just gotten worse because there's been so many challenges in the education system, like overall, at every level. And the thing that I find the most distressing amongst all that, that we have to fill in these gaps in the first place, but I think it could be attributed to the fact that we have seemed to, as a national culture, shifted away from the importance of education, analysis and critical thinking, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Right.
I think we've kind of moved away from that. And so there's a lot of voids there that need to be filled or that will be filled. Let's say that will be filled by people who do want to help. And then also the scary part about that, though, is that the snake oil salesman within those spaces too, because there's also a lot of opportunity. And that's where, you have to, your own self-awareness your determination to be your most authentic self, like you have to be determined to logic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You have to be determined to use that as part of every fundamental decision that you make. And I don't do it all the time. None of us.
Yeah.
We're not machines. But all I'm
Not
saying,
yet.
not yet. But all I'm saying is like, yeah, I mean, that's what's so damning about all of this is that, you know, when we have these discussions, a lot of it comes down to, it feels like to me, just a certain aspect of critical thinking.
Yeah.
And we have to, and no matter how you were reminded of that, that has value.
Yeah. 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 Just being you.
Yeah.
Just you having something to say. Just you being who you are and being authentic has value.
I think so.
And you don't need to be anybody or impress anybody else but yourself.
I had to impress my wife, though.
Well, yes.
I did have to do that.
Yeah, you know, and you need to continue to impress your wife.
I don't think she's very impressed anymore.
Well, you know, it's a love-hate thing.
No. We have a really good relationship.
No. They're hey, let me tell you, they're super cute, almost like disgustingly so.
It is
like,
kind of stupid, actually.
Like,
it does. It is. Although I think she was like, when I told her I was coming over to do this, she just kind of looked at me. She's like, it doesn't. I was like, I know. I was like, so I'll take my key in case. It was like, you'll be longer than you think. Which is fine.
No, that's the nature of our relationship.
I think that's a great
thing. I have a lot of homework to do, which I'm probably not going to get to it now.
No, I wouldn't worry about that. It's just homework. I didn't do homework. I turned out fine, sort of, not really.
But when we get together, we just, truly, this, we've gone almost 2 hours now.
Oh, has it been that long already?
Yeah, and I think. This is the beauty of our friendship, our relationship is we're just having a conversation.
I only mentioned football once.
I know, right?
Isn't that crazy?
I don't talk about football a lot.
You shouldn't.
Yeah, a lot of people trip out. Trying to talk to me about football is like
it's kind of what it's like, and I feel this way like when people ask me, "Do you like this band?" And this could be any band.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be like it could be some arbitrary band. And here's the thing that's so weird about that. If I say no, they get offended.
Yeah.
Like they get
really?
Yeah.
Like how do you know?
Like, okay. So I mean, because he'll start asking me all these questions about music. And I don't know everything, but I know a few things.
Yeah.
And they'll just start peppering me with these questions about, well, what about this guy? And how about her? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, if that's what floats your boat, that's great. But if you ask me my opinion, if my opinion is not the same as yours, why are you upset?
Yeah. Yeah. But that feeds what we have been talking about this whole podcast is. So
I guess the question is like, for like football, like when people ask you, like when we saw the extra point get tracked, you're like, that's the game. I was like, you know what? He's probably right. And you're like, okay, I'm done. Or we do like what was going to happen.
It's almost like it's been such a part of my life, and it's still such a part of my life. You actually learn how to see the play. And certain things transpire and they happen, and you're like there's a high probability that the game is probably going to go this direction.
Yeah, it's probably like well, that's the way I feel about music when people ask me like a bunch of stuff about like music. Is like, do you like? I'm not gonna say a band name, but they're bad. Like they're just not good at all.
He's been nice.
And someone recently asked me if this band was any good, and like there's some song like, oh, I know, it was like, oh, they have this certain song on the radio, blah blah blah, and I listened to it, and it's like, I've never heard this before in my entire life, and of course I feel like an old man when I say that, and they said, no, what you should know is by blah blah blah, and I was like, oh, that band, I wouldn't listen to him in the first place. I know people say that about my band too. It's like if they was like, "Oh, Claw's band sucks." Like this is not good. I mean, but this is a personal opinion though,
Right.
And so you shouldn't be mad because someone doesn't have the exact same opinion as you do.
Yeah.
So if that was the case, then why did you even bother asking them a question?
Yeah.
You're just all like running around with like the same T-shirts on.
It's like these San Francisco 49er fans. Yeah.
I'm a Niner fan. I am a Niner fan. But I knew we weren't going to win. I knew we were going to
it's funny, the conspiracy theories that come out of that now,
Out of that?
The game was rigged. And like people like, really,
oh my God.
I've as you know, I've worked with the NFL, and so I understand all the behind the scenes that's happening. And had I not been involved at that level of athletics and competition, and understanding that it's a production, understanding that this is a business, and understanding that there's a lot of things in place. So for one thing to happen, then there's other things that needed to transpire.
It's like, you can't just
you can't just go, if there's a script, you just can't go off script to change the narrative, because it doesn't work like that.
It's actually a real game.
It's actually a real game. There's no conspiracy to it. There might be some inconsistencies because there's a what we call lag.
Yeah.
What you're seeing is vastly different than what we see in real time. And that's just media in general.
Yeah, for sure.
So people don't understand what happening behind the scene and how big of a production this is.
Like
there's no way there can be a conspiracy. There's too many moving parts.
That's always the thing I just never understood. It's like, I don't understand why some people are just so prone to that stuff. And I say like the opposite, like from a military standpoint. I swear to God, if you heard about some conspiracy,
I probably done seriously, involved myself in some of those conspiracies.
All of us do it at some point, right? But seriously, think about this. Well, I heard that there was one I heard about. There were supposed to be these Walmart's had some sort of like military bases or something under them, or something to that effect.
Sort of like the Denver airport.
There's one for the Denver airport too.
Supposedly, I don't know. I mean, there's a whole like a whole train system underneath the,
how many people would have to be involved to keep some? And you're telling me no one's talking?
Well, they kill them off.
Oh, that's why. Okay, yeah. But okay, so if it was this serious, then the opposite is true. If it was that serious, how did you hear about it? And how are you alive to tell me about it?
Well, that one person that got away from.
I forgot. That escaped from something
the island. The island in Oregon.
Or somewhere.
That guy. That person.
That guy. That was always my point. It's like, honestly, it's like some conspiracy. Okay, so like the whole thing with syphilis in the military testing back in the 60s. 50s, 60s, all that actually was true. Like that type of sort of thing happened.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, but how long did it take for us to actually hear about that?
Yeah, they had to declassify.
They had to declassify the whole thing, and then when it was declassified, it was really swept under the rug in the media, as far as I was concerned, because there were new safeguards in place and integration, yada yada, yada, all this stuff. So if you flip the coin from if you flip the coin a bit, turn it around a bit. And you say, someone tells me, hey, did you hear about X, Y, and Z dealing with some sort of military entity that involved the president and blah, blah, blah. And that's why blank, blank, blank. I mean, come on. Let's just start first layer. First layer. So you're telling me the president is shooting laser beams from the sky. I'm like, okay. Something like that. Seriously,
I might have been inclined to believe that at some point.
But think about this. This is where it gets wild. Not to say they're shooting laser beams to the sky to destroy like our enemies. they're destroying farmland so that we can't grow avocado. It's like something, and we can't have water. How?
That's more recent. That happened. That happened like last year when they burnt off all of the mountains in Maui. Yeah,
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's what
that's what I'm
happened.
saying. Like,
Yeah,
okay, so let's just
not
assume,
because of the volcanoes.
yeah, no, that has nothing to do with anything. Like, not do global warming and stuff, and deforestation and whatever. But think about it just for just a second. You heard about that.
I did.
Like you like as
Yeah.
if you would believe this. You heard about that, and you're still alive to tell me. And everybody knows this, including you. But that's like, but that was, I mean, does anybody else see how the logic here just doesn't add up?
Well, it's so obvious. That's how they throw you off track.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
That's why.
okay,
So information
it's
overload.
so yeah,
Information overload. Yeah.
it's so over the top.
Garbage
It
in,
has to
garbage
be,
Garbage in, garbage
yeah.
out. Which I had a thought about that actually. We probably should take that. That should be like one of the start the music things.
Yeah. Hey, well, it's reverse psychology.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about this though. It might be one of those things like the reason why there's such why there's such a willingness to believe that type of conspiracy theory is because the ones previously were done to minority communities. Like it actually happened.
Yeah.
Like the whole bugging of, Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And the Black Panthers being like all shut up and all that stuff. Like those actually happen. So if you turn it just a bit, you say you can sell yourself on this. Well, this happened to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Harvey Milk, all that.
Yeah.
Redlining.
Redlining. What are they called? Not desegregation. What am I thinking? Where Margaret Sanger brings in all of the clinics into the community.
Oh, and like gentrification and stuff like
that. Yeah, something along that line.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of like, okay, what was the lady who her cells were used for cancer? Oprah Winfrey just did a special on her like a couple years ago. Anyway, yes, because this has happened to communities that are underrepresented from a certain point of view, and they truly are underrepresented. Like I told you, the Jim Crow stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if you really think about that and you say, oh, well, I can see that happened. So obviously, because then you become selfish and you're like, well, I can believe this even crazier because look how crazy it was what they did to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but there should be a discussion about it, I think.
But it is true. And the idea that you're speaking about is true, especially why we're so willing to believe some of the astronomical stuff, just because there are some things that did happen within our communities and society as a whole that would lend you to question now everything.
Yeah. Sweatshops, right? Sweatshops at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
Right. Company towns.
Yeah.
Company store, all that stuff. Like, what was it? Some of the miners' strikes, some of the union strikes back in the early 1900s. Like those were full-on conspiracies.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why like you talk about union bosses and stuff like that, because of like, which holidays are supposed to honor that. I think it's I forget the name of it, but I think isn't there like a workers' holiday or something like that?
What, Labor Day?
Labor Day. Yeah, I think Labor Day is actually supposed to be in honor like the deaths of that. Of that
okay.
Event.
Interesting. I have to look that up.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to, because I'm not sure if I'm accurate on that, but I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think Boxing Day deals with that. I think that's an Australian holiday. Boxing
Interesting.
Day. I think so.
I don't know.
Something like, but there are instances in which Terrible conspiracies were happening. Savings loan crisis, right? Enron.
Yeah. Yeah. I delve in the market. I follow stock market, and I specifically trade currencies.
So you're training yourself to let go of everything that you fear to lose.
Pretty
I was gonna
much.
say, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I've had a little bit of a rough ride this last.
yeah,
It's like,
but
get smacked around.
the deeper you go into that world of finance, the market moves with or without you.
Oh, yes, it does.
And
Yes, it does.
and when you first start, and especially while you're trying to learn a skill, absolutely you're going to lose some money. So you got to be willing to invest what you're willing to lose.
I swear, man. If I could, that's why I said if I could have done it again, I would study finance and economics, and
Yeah.
I worked in the financial sector.
Well, markets move.
Yeah,
and they're gonna come and they're gonna go up and they're gonna go down.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, that's what economics is about. Like, is a study of like human behavior,
Yeah.
like with money and stuff. So,
And that's exactly what it is. It's human behavior.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's really you have buyers and sellers,
Mm-hmm.
and so as you understand what these candles on a chart really represent, it is not emotional.
No,
there is no conspiracy. There's no room, because really it's all based in numbers and calculations, and people's fear. And so when you see the market for what it is, you can understand, hey, there's a level of fear going on.
Right.
And
so
when you
pulling money out,
that's when
like
you
as at our level, like
Right.
they move money around and stuff like that. Yes, it's a huge game. It's really interesting, a lot of ways. But
So at Cloud, we're pulling up on almost exactly 2 hours now.
Oh wow, that's pretty fun.
Yeah,
so we should have like a different episode, like where we just discuss like fusion.
Hey, this is freaking this has been freaking awesome.
And
you've been amazing. What I want to say to the audience, to the viewers, is right now, in even looking back, if you're watching this after this gets recorded and released, you have to get into the game. Life is a game, and sometimes we don't understand how all of the pieces are going to fall in place. Claude here is an interesting man, and I've done a lot of interesting things. And the reason why we can come together and have these crucial conversations.
Is that the name of the podcast? Crucial conversations.
Hey, maybe we start our own podcast.
No, I thought about that.
Hey,
actually. It'd be kind of with Adam. We could talk to. We could have like Hey,
maybe we do, man. This is we're having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But you got to get in the game. That's the key, and you have to be determined in whatever way that you can be determined. You want to be determined, and you want to move forward. So on that note, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for being on the podcast. We're probably going to continue the conversation after I end this, but for the viewers, thank you for tuning in.
And thank you for having me, and definitely thank you for providing a platform for us all.
Absolutely.
It's been nice.
Yep. And on that, good night.